Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 237, holiday weekend. September is here. Don, we got a good show. We got a really interesting topic this week, and it's time to move trail cameras. We're going to talk about that, fall food plots, and we're going to try to get 7 questions done tonight. But first and foremost, let's talk about the weather a little bit. I am still dry as a bone in Kentucky. We got a chance of rain. This podcast is going to air on Sunday. We're recording earlier in the week due to your travel schedule, so hopefully by the time this airs, I've had a little bit of rain. But what's the weather been like up your way, and how's the plots looking?
It's been hot and dry. We did have a pop-up shower the other morning, but it gave me just a little over 1/10 of an inch of rain, so it didn't amount to anything. We need a rain bad. Looking at the weather forecast, it is supposed to cool off. Depending on what forecast you look at, there's a chance of rain Saturday. I hope we get it. We could use 2 inches. It'd be dried up in no time. So got my clover plot that I planted in early August. It's barely popping out of the ground. I think an inch of rain would just make that stuff explode. And then I planted my deadly dozen the other day and looked at it today, and it's not out of the ground at all. I'm sure some of that seed is down there and has swelled because we did have a little bit of ground moisture from a rain week before. But we could definitely use a rain.
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to, even if we have to take a snippet of this, to answer the most popular question that the office or our social media gets this time of year, and we're just going to get it out of the way of the podcast, and that is people have planted their fall plots, and they had that heat wave where it got baked, and they had a little bit of a shower. They're worried that their seed is bad now. Let's talk just a little bit about it because, I think it was 6-7 years ago I planted holiday weekend, and it had a drought for the entire month of September and had seed lay in the ground that whole time. We got rain in October, and my deadly dozen just came and looked great. Of course, that late germination, I didn't have a lot of brassicas that did much, but still had a nice green carpet for the winter. The real fear in this situation is those pop-up showers you just mentioned. Those seeds swell and they crack and they start to germinate, and then you get that hot heat and baking it. That's where you get a lot of trouble, isn't it?
Yeah, but even then, that little seed that's germinated, with a little plant, whatever you want to call it, it's pretty resilient. Now, it absolutely can kill it, but I think people don't realize how resilient this seed is. I mean, there's a lot of native grasses, for example, that can lay in the soil for 50 years, and then when conditions are right, boom, there it is. It grows. Seeds aren't, most seeds anyway, are not as fragile as people think they are. But you make a great point, Terry. When it cracks and germinates, starts to put that little root down, if it just goes totally dry for an extended period of time, you can definitely run into trouble then.
So people call and they text and they send messages all the time. Should I replant? Should I replant? Should I replant? And that question's hard to answer because, we don't know what that seed did. And, every situation's a little bit different. Is that seed laying on top of the ground? Was it drilled? How much moisture was in the ground when you planted it? But, the last thing you want to do is take a chance and double seed or replant more brassicas on top of more brassicas and end up getting it thick. So I think to be safe, if you're really thinking that your seed is bad and you feel like you have to go back and double seed in, I would just go back in with either harvest salad or a cereal grain and put that in on top of it. Don't go back in with brassicas on top of brassicas that haven't germinated yet, or you'll end up with some trouble.
Yeah. The other question we get a lot this time of year, I don't know how many times I've answered it this week, is it's dry. I don't have any rain in the forecast. Should I plant now or should I wait until I see a rain coming? Well, the thing about it is you get a pop-up shower and you miss it. Well, you just missed your opportunity. And that seed can lay in the dust for a long time, many, many weeks. I would rather get it planted and be, have it there ready to grow when that you do get the rain, and trying to time it. And then you miss the rain. It gets muddy for a day or two. And by the time you get it in there, you've lost a great opportunity.
Yeah, we're recording on Thursday this week, and we have a really good chance of rain on Saturday. We planted today. We brought over the 8-foot G-Series drill from Earned Outdoors. Todd Covey brought it over. And, man, I'm telling you what, they lightened up that drill from the old Genesis. It's a whole lot lighter than it used to be. And I was talking to you a little bit earlier. Our ground is so hard, it's like a parking lot. And even though they lightened that drill up, we set that depth and it cut perfect right into it, as hard as our ground was, and didn't have to disturb the soil. Got to go down through the thatch that was on top that I had terminated, and it did fantastic. So hopefully we get a nice steady shower for quite a few hours on Saturday. And when I get back from out of town, middle of October, I got a nice green carpet that's sitting there.
Well, that's ideal, and we have no control over Mother Nature and the weather, so all we can do is do what's in our control, and that's get that seed in the ground and hope for the best.
The one thing about it is, I think for most of the Midwest this week, the temperatures are supposed to be much cooler. I think at least in my area, we're not having those highs of 98, 99. I think it's supposed to be a highs of 80s. So hopefully we get some showers and stuff doesn't cook quite as bad. So
right.
So I want to go ahead and let's take a quick break for Osseo. It's a little bit early in the podcast, but I want to come back. We got a very unique topic that I want you to talk about a little bit. And it's going to be kind of a combo conversation about you moving your trail cameras this coming weekend. It's kind of your tradition to use holiday weekends to deploy your cell camera, and then the September holiday to move your trail camera. So we're going to get that knocked out and then come back and answer our questions for the end of the week. So stay tuned.
Osseo Gear has perfected one of the most innovative camo patterns on the market. The unique camo pattern designed to mimic the feather patterns of one of North America's greatest predators, the great horned owl. Combined with intuitive features, superior comfort, and ultra high quality fabrics give bow hunters the ultimate advantage. Osseo has outfitted over 10,000 bow hunters across the country with over 1,000 5-star reviews. Visit asiogear.com to check it out for yourself. Use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off.
Well, Joe Miles is up, I believe. Is he moose hunting this week? Did I understand that right?
He's in what, Alberta?
I think
he's
so.
in Alberta.
So
I just thought he was hunting whitetails. I had no idea.
I'm not sure what he's doing. He's killing something somewhere all the time.
Yeah. It'll end up in something big dead.
Yeah. So I did hear that a lot of the stuff that's out of stock is back in or will be back in shortly. So make sure you check out our friends at Osseo. They got some new cool stuff like hand muffs, ghillie suit or leafy suits, and some new base layer stuff that I really like this year. All right. So we were just talking before we got on the air about your trail camera deployment, and you made a comment about cell cameras and some observations that you've been seeing. Had a comment made at a seminar that you did last night. I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you walk through this, because it's not the first time I've heard it, and people are going to agree and disagree, and I just think it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, so I typically deploy my cell cam or my trail cameras, both cell and non-cell, about 4th of July weekend, and just kind of my tradition every year. And then Labor Day weekend, I'm shifting a lot of those cameras. Now, some of them are going to stay in the same location throughout the entire fall, but a lot of those are going to be shifted from summer feeding areas, where the bucks are out on soybean fields or alfalfa fields or whatever. And I'm going to get those cameras into rut areas, places where I've got the rope scrapes hung or where there's typically some good buck activity in the fall and especially during the rut. But, I'm running about 50 trail cameras at the moment, and 12 of those cameras are cell cameras. And the thing that I noticed, and this is not something that I noticed this year for the first time, but it's just like every year it becomes more and more evident that the bucks are avoiding those cell cameras. And this summer, I've got some pretty decent bucks that I'm tracking down, and I don't have a single good picture from a cell camera of a good buck. Not one. I use that Reconyx software to keep track of my photos. So the good photos that come through, I save them and on that software, and then I can easily scroll back through it by date, and I can see what pictures I've saved.
Right.
And I don't have one this summer of a good buck that I've saved on those 12 cell cameras. And those 12 cell cameras are in some fantastic locations. And it just becomes more and more apparent to me with each passing year that deer, and especially mature, well, I think all deer can detect those cameras. I just think the mature bucks are more sensitive to it. And I don't know what it is they're detecting, but if it's some kind of radio wave or what in the air, but I just got to believe that they can detect those.
It's not the first time I've heard this. I think it's been a theory that people have, and the funny thing is there's no way we can prove or disprove it. But I've been hearing this for a couple years, and I don't know. I mean, part of me thinks it's far-fetched, and part of me thinks it wouldn't surprise me one bit. The way these animals and critters are, what they could or couldn't pick up on, who knows?
Well, I've had multiple people ask me about it, and without me bringing up the topic, and last night I did a seminar up towards Kankakee, Illinois, for a private group that I'm working with to manage some properties. And one gentleman at this presentation asked that question. Is the cell cameras, can deer detect cell cameras? And I don't have the answer for sure, but I believe that they can, based on my experience.
I think sometimes, you've gotten good bucks on your cell cameras before. It's not to say that you can't get it. I think the observation you're making is just over time in areas that you've had standard cameras versus cell. I think you've seen the difference as far as what bucks you've gotten. I don't know. I mean, it's while you're hunting and you got a cell phone in your pocket, is that also going to deter a deer? Maybe.
I don't know. I don't have the answer, but I know with regular non-cell cameras, deer can see them. That infrared or whatever it is that allows that picture or that camera to take pictures at night. I absolutely know without any doubt whatsoever that deer can see that. So, but with the cell cameras, it's not seeing the camera. There's more to it than that.
No.
Because I've got situations where I can hide, cameras at a specific spot where the deer basically never know it's there with a non-cell camera. Right. But then I put a cell camera there, and all of a sudden the deer activity stops.
Right.
Or especially the mature buck activity. And I'll tell you what, I think that after this year, I'm going to be considering not even using cell cameras on my home farm. I backed off the number of cameras on this farm and the location. Some of the more sensitive locations, I pulled cameras away just because I'm trying to take my property to the next level. You know, I think it was a couple of years ago I mentioned that I'm going to try to make my property twice as good as it was, and I think I'm on the track of doing that. But part of that, I mean, I think I've got the habitat now about as good as I can get the habitat. So what I've got to change is the management, the you know, how I go about doing some things. The habitat can only be so good, and I think I'm there. But what I allow to happen on the property is what I can change. And, you know, for example, I had one food plot that was on the edge of my sanctuary, but it was a clover plot with some fruit trees growing in it. And in order to maintain that clover, I had to drive pretty much through the heart of my sanctuary to mow that clover. Now, of course, I never did that during hunting season. It was only in the summer months, and during the summer, the bucks really aren't on my place. But one example of changing my management is this year I have not mowed that plot at all. I'm just going to let nature take over. Those fruit trees are now big enough, they're established. I don't have to worry about them getting choked out by weeds or anything. And when it comes to cameras, to take my management to the next level, I think I need to eliminate cell cameras on my property. I'm going to still have some more for security reasons, for trespassers and things like that, and not in areas that are more sensitive for the mature bucks.
Well, I mean, when you start thinking, deer's senses are so much elevated higher than what a human can even understand anyway. I mean, who's to think that there isn't something that we don't know about when it comes to that anyway? And then, you know, I guess comment down below. I mean, for those of you, please don't fill up our private messages on social media. I mean, I appreciate the people that comment about the podcast, but I don't mean to sound rude, but we can't respond to everybody as it is. But if you want to comment and engage conversation below on YouTube, that's great. That's where a lot of dialogue that we can have that people can kind of read. I'd prefer it actually there, not in our private messages. But I guess where I'm going at is, Don, if you have a cell camera like in Kentucky where there's mineral and food, and you got mature bucks coming to that, there's probably enough initiative or positive feed or something good out of it that they might overcome that or learn to deal with it because of they're getting something out of it. But you're talking about cell cameras in Illinois with deer just walking a trail or a pinch point, rope scrape. I mean, there is, outside of topography, natural pathway, that's the only reason that the deer is there. Outside of, you know, you don't have the luxury of using feed or mineral, and that's what your observation is. It's not being able to use any of the stuff that we're using here.
Right. I'd like to hear the comments from the listeners, and I'm going to make a bet that more listeners think that deer can detect cell cameras than listeners thinking that deer cannot. And it'd be interesting to see the comments, because I just had numerous people contact me and say that they think that the deer can detect them.
Well, our friend Patrick's been saying it for years, and I always laughed at him, and he might be onto something. I might have to eat crow one day. You never know.
Well, we'll never be able to prove it one way or another, but you know, when with 12 of them out, you would think in the course of this summer, and they're in good locations, where I can think of one location in particular that I have always got giant bucks in velvet on a licking branch. I got Mel's photo there. You probably know exactly the licking branch I'm talking about. Well, This year, for the first time, I put a cell camera in there. I'd always had a non-cell there, and that camera is situated in such a way that the deer don't see it. And so with a non-cell, I continued to get a lot of good pictures. But this year, I took a cell camera in there, thinking I'd cut down on the human intrusion, going in to check that camera. And the opposite happened, is I've not got a picture of a good one there.
So here we are thinking we're doing a good thing by taking human intrusion down. So what's worse,
Well,
Obviously, if you haven't gotten a picture of it, that's worse. So
maybe that cell camera is like continual intrusion. It's just the deer detect it and they don't like it.
I don't know. I think probably all the manufacturers of trail cameras are probably cringing right now because I know we got a couple of our buddies that listen to the podcast that are probably cringing right now, trying to figure out how to respond to it. But who knows? I mean, it's just a conversation topic of an observation that I don't know. Like I said, it's just a theory, and we don't know if it's right or wrong. No way to prove it, no way to disprove it.
Well, I can tell you this, all the good buck pictures I've got this summer are on non-cell cameras. Every one of them.
Yeah, interesting.
Yep.
All right. What's the plan for this holiday weekend and moving cameras? Let's transition to that a little bit. Yeah, I think you're gonna kind of do your fall shift here.
Yeah, I will start it. I'm going to be speaking on Saturday in Michigan. And when I get home from that, I'll be done for the fall. So I'll have all of September, October, and November to be chasing big deer. And it's going to start as soon as I get home from that trip with shifting these cameras. So, I've got rope scrapes that have been there for in some cases years, many years, that I will move cameras to. I'm probably only shifting like half of my cameras. About half of them are in locations where they will remain for the entire hunting season, and the other half were like out on field edges of soybeans or clover, alfalfa, whatever, and those cameras will be moved because those food sources are going to change. Those fields will get harvested. The frost will hit the alfalfa and make it dormant and lose its attraction. So I'll move off of those, and I like to have those cameras at those rutting locations ahead of the bucks moving there. So those bachelor groups are going to start breaking up real quick now when the buck shed velvet. And by having that camera there before the buck shifts to his fall range, it tells me when individual bucks show up at their fall range. And it doesn't all happen in September. There's some bucks that don't move to their fall range until mid-October. And I like to know when they show up, so if one of them becomes a target buck, it gives me an idea when I can start hunting him. I don't want to start hunting him 2 weeks before he shows up and, put pressure on the area and educate the does and other bucks that are already there. So that's the big thing, is I want to make that shift with my cameras before the bucks make the shift from summer range to fall range.
Now, I don't know what it was, and it might just be my limited, data points, but tonight's Thursday. On Monday, it was like a switch got flipped. My rope scrapes on 4 different farms, all of a sudden they were on them all night. I didn't have a lot of daylight activity, but you know how does will use them all summer long. They'll go up and sniff on them and rub their face. But it was starting Monday night. I even made a Facebook post about it with a little 3-year-old on it. But there was bucks on all of my rope scrapes like crazy starting Monday night, and I don't know what it was.
Well, I did not notice that, but like I said, my cell cameras might have spooked all the bucks off of those where I had them. But most of my rope scrapes do not have cameras on them at this point. But they will by the time we record next time.
Did you get any feedback from people about hardhorn and early shedding? We mentioned that on the last podcast. I got a couple people actually quite a few people that said they'd already had bucks shedding the 3rd week of August.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people. I mean, every day I'm getting somebody sending me a picture of a hardhorn buck. So I have not seen one yet, but then I haven't checked any cameras. So, and the cell cameras have all spooked all the bucks. So there we go.
All right. Well, let's transition. We're going to put a question up and get that going because we got 7 questions, and I want to get through those tonight.
All right, the first one comes from Mike Stoltzfus from Herndon, Pennsylvania. It says, "Hey, Don, love the podcast. Question I have is I like to plant deadly dozen in the garden for a cover crop. My wife thinks it's not a good cover crop. Can you convince her it's a good idea? Mike, I think it is a fantastic idea, and I think people should actually buy Deadly Dozen. It comes in a 1/4 acre bag. A bag of Deadly Dozen would be the perfect cover crop for a garden. It's got a lot of the same plant species that are used in cover crops. You know, you got the turnips and the radishes, the deep tillage radish. You got the cereal grains. You got some clover. I mean, Deadly Dozen should be a fantastic cover crop. And then you just come in the spring and you till it up and you plant your garden. So
remember very early when we were testing the Deadly Dozen with different varieties, we actually had trespassers with a wheelbarrow digging up our turnips and harvesting our turnips. But yeah, I've actually taken our turnips and sugar beet or our beets to my mom to cook for dinner.
Yeah, I can actually share that picture. You can post it if you want, Terry. And it was actually Christmas Day. The most unbelievable thing, Christmas Day at high noon, trespassers come onto the property with a wheelbarrow and a little 2-year-old child, and they're out there pulling turnips and taking them. And who would ever guess? But that Deadly Dozen would make a fantastic cover crop for gardens, and it comes in the right size bag even.
So that means yes, talk your wife into it.
Yeah, and you folks with gardens, there you go. Consider buying a bag for your garden this fall.
But don't plant it too thick. You gotta really watch and not plant it too thick on your small gardens.
Yep. Next one comes from Logan Wagler from Atwater, Ohio. Says, hey, Don and Terry. First of all, I wanted to thank you for the very informative podcast. Every time I listen to it, I get fired up for the upcoming season. My question has to do with wind directions and food plots. So obviously, when you set up a food plot, you need to have a dead zone to blow your scent into. My question is, could I potentially build a fence around a section of the food plot to prevent deer from accessing the food plot from that direction? Would this work to create a safe area to blow my wind into? Well, absolutely, Logan. I mean, whenever, we're consulting and we're setting up properties, we're trying to dictate that where those deer enter the plot. And we can do it a number of different ways. You mentioned a fence, which is a great way, but, stacking up piles of trees or whatever for the deer to work around is another. You definitely want to dictate how that deer enters the plot, and so that as he does enter the plot, he's coming within shooting range of your stand or your blind. I mean, that's all. I look at it as pretty basic. Guys tell me that I take a lot of things for granted that think everybody knows, and maybe that's one of them. But you definitely want to dictate deer movement on your property. I think that a big mistake that a lot of folks that own hunting land make is they don't fully take advantage of the opportunities that owning that land gives them. They just want to go onto the property and look at what the deer are doing and set their stands based on what the deer are doing, when we can dictate that movement and make those deer move in such a way that it's to our advantage. And you mentioned a dead zone for your scent to blow into. Yeah, make those deer come right up to the edge of that dead zone within range of your stand, and yet you still got a good place for your scent to blow with low likelihood of those deer catching on to you. So manipulating your property is just a huge advantage to property ownership that I think a lot of landowners are missing out on.
Al Foster used to use the analogy of slices of a pie, or think of it as a dartboard with the little angles of it, and that's how critical wind and access and one slice over is what the buck needs, and you got to be one slice over for your wind so the buck has what he wants but doesn't spook you. And it's just such a great analogy to hear. It's so impressive that he figured that out so early, with very little technology or research that we have at our disposal today. He was doing this before trail cameras. It was just true woodsmanship and being out there and figuring it out. That's what's more impressive than anything.
Yeah, I first heard Roger Rothar talk about it, and I think that's where Al got the idea, and then he kind of perfected it and shared with me and saved me a lot of years on the learning curve. But play in the wind is critical with mature bucks, and I promise you, anybody that's killing mature bucks consistently knows the wind direction every time they go to the woods. They're not just picking a stand and going out, and they're not just basing a stand location on sign only. They're considering wind direction when they hang their stand and every time they go hunting.
I want to, before we go to the next question, we use this podcast sometimes just to kind of tell stories of opportunities and salesmanship. I know I mentioned that story of the trailer a couple weeks ago, and I posted something on Facebook this week about the tractor that I bought. But there's something that I think is a great opportunity for our listeners that are looking for a career or looking for a change. And for the last couple of weeks, we've been airing a spot on the podcast from our friends at Midwest Land Group. And they really didn't ask us to do this. I was talking to their director of operations, Bryce Noon, this week. And these guys are expanding. They got like 120 agents in 13 states, but they're coming into Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio. And they really need a managing broker in each of those states. So if you're in real estate and you want to work, and Don, you can talk to the credibility of the guy at the top. We've gotten to know Brian Kraft and consider him a really close friend. But the integrity of the people behind this company is like no other. If you're a managing broker and you're looking for a career to align with somebody that kind of fits the same mold as Don and I, we'll be happy to make an introduction. They really need to move, and Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio are on the radar. That's the next on the list. They're ready to go. They just need to be aligned with the right people, networked in the right people. If you know of someone or you are someone, hit us up. You can apply at MidwestLandGroup.com. But if you need me to make the connection to you and Bryce, reach out to me. I'd be happy to do that. But we've known Brian for a lot of years. We stayed up probably till 2:00 in the morning talking to Bryce at one of your with Brian Kraft at one of your master classes one time. And you talk about a guy who built a business from nothing. I think the world of that guy.
Yeah, he's got the ultimate rags to riches story, and he's a good Christian guy. He's been blessed, and he knows where to give the credit for his success. But he's taught me quite a bit about the real estate business. I had my real estate license, until I just let it expire in April this year. And Brian was very helpful. I just didn't have the time to dedicate to it that it needs. I will say this, that Midwest Land Group is going to demand a little more out of their agents than most other real estate groups, but their agents are going to make more money than just about any other group, probably any other group. They do business totally different. I'm not going to get into all the details, turn this into a Midwest Land Group promo, but if you're in the real estate business, I don't care what company you're with today, it would be worth your time to explore Midwest Land Group. Just a lot of things that they do different. And it pays off for the company, but also for the agents. And if you're a managing broker, especially, this is a golden opportunity.
And it's tough to make the cut. I mean, when you apply there, there's social media stalking you, and if there's something that's a red flag, it's hard to make the cut. It's the elite of the elite, but they are looking for brokers, managing brokers, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio. We'll move on to the next question and not waste any more time. But get with me. I'll make the introductions for you. Huge career opportunities, if just a heads up for people.
Yep, the next one comes from Trent Peterson from Snyder, Colorado. Not sure we've ever had a Colorado question before, but we have now. Trent says, hello, Don and Terry. Love the podcast and your unwavering commitment to God. You have talked a lot about a summer range versus a fall range. Could you go into detail about what makes an area a summer range or a fall range? Is it food availability or cover or something else entirely? I would love to be able to more effectively set my cameras at the correct times of year. Second question, hypothetically, how much property would one have to own for a deer to be born and live its entire life on your property? Would 6,500 acres be enough? 10,000? Curious to hear your thoughts. God bless. Well, in regards to how many acres, I mean, that's just a question that's impossible to answer. It's going to vary from buck to buck. And then the buck, you may have 10,000 acres, but the buck's home range is on the edge of that 10,000 acres, where half of it is on yours and half of it's on the other or off of your property. And 90% of your property he's not even using. So I don't think it's possible to own enough that every buck on your property is going to stay home. There's always going to be those edge bucks that are also living off of the property. So that's just a very difficult question to answer. The other question, what was the other question?
Summer range and fall range.
Summer range,
Go
fall
into
range,
the details.
Yeah. So you got to understand the life cycle of a deer, the year-round life cycle. So in the summer, the bucks like to be in bachelor groups. They want to hang out with other bucks. They're going to be on a decent food source. But the thing of it is Mother Nature wants to ensure survival of the species. During the summertime, the does typically get the best habitat. So thicker cover where fawns can be hidden. That's where the does want to be in the spring and summer months. And at the same time, bucks want to be in more open terrain. They've got those growing antlers that are very tender. So, a lot of times those bucks, those bachelor groups, and especially in more heavily timbered areas, they will be in open timber, not thick timber. They want to be in that open cover. Out in the farm country, like where I live, a lot of times those bucks are living out in the ag fields, and especially the waterways, grass waterways within those ag fields. You got to totally understand the life cycle. And then, so the bucks are spending their summers, out in the bachelor groups, but that bachelor group is going to break up about this time of the year. From now until about mid-October, it's a slow process as one buck after another will eventually leave that bachelor group and go to his fall range. Now, some of those bucks may have the same range during the fall and the winter, or during the fall and the summer, and they don't really shift that far. But others may shift for miles, and they may summer miles from where they're going to spend the fall. And, it's all about that life cycle and how they have different requirements for different times of the year, how Mother Nature is looking out for the survival of the species by giving those does the best, thickest bedding cover to hide those fawns. And that pretty much, I hope that answers your question. So
food plays a role for late season, right? That's when you're talking about a shift of the, whether it's bucks or does, that's really when the food plays the major factor, right?
Yeah, and what happens is in the summer, that deer herd is more evenly scattered across the landscape. And then come fall, a couple things happen. Crops get harvested, so fields become bare. And hunting pressure, human activity in the woods picks up. And then the deer herd, both bucks and does, they want to gravitate towards bedding cover that's not disturbed and prime food sources. So in the winter, like you just mentioned, food's in shortest supply and most limited. That's where the deer are going to be concentrated around that food, especially if you got good security cover close to that food. So it's just a matter of understanding the entire year-round life cycle of both the bucks and the does to put it all together. So in the summertime, you're looking to hang trail cameras for bucks in those feeding areas, feeding areas that are in the wide open, as long as there's some kind of cover. I had Jack Houston from the Missouri Deer Recovery at my place recently flying his thermal drone, and we found all kinds of bucks bedded out in soybean fields. You wouldn't think they would bed in soybean fields, but yeah, during the day they'll bed out in soybean fields. And when they're laying down in those beans are up about waist high right now. You can't see them deer. So I think that's something that people think that those bucks got to be bedded in the woods all the time, and they don't. And they'll bed right out in the open waterway, right in broad daylight, because there's just nobody back there to disturb them. And with those tender growing antlers, they don't want to be in the thick stuff.
Huh. And nobody around, they can smell for one way and watch the other way, and
yep,
free of human intrusion, right? You've said that actually, once or twice.
The best buck photos I've got this summer has been in a grass waterway with corn on both sides of it. I take a stake out and I put my camera on a stake because there's no trees, and those bucks live in those grass waterways.
Huh. All right. Well, next question is from Perrysburg, Ohio. I used to spend a lot of time in Perrysburg, Ohio.
Well, never heard of it. Steve Taylor from Perrysburg says, Don and Terry, thank you for providing this great resource for all of us whitetail enthusiasts. I have a few questions on mock scrapes that I would love to get your input on. I should probably start with, do you make mock scrapes? If so, when is the best time to switch your cameras to mock scrapes? Around Labor Day, or do you do it sooner? Finally, I have heard Tony the Pratt talk about how he likes to load his property up with a bunch of mock scrapes to try to keep the bucks on his property. I have also seen videos from the whitetail group where they remove many of the licking branches around their stand setups and keep just one main scrape within 20 yards of their stand. Do you think one of these options makes more sense than another? Thank you for your time and good luck this season. Well, Steve, I do use mock scrapes. The rope scrape in particular is my preferred mock scrape. Hanging the rope from the branch, putting the scent on the rope, and it definitely works.
From what I understand, everybody's inventing it and posting it on YouTube right now about using rope scrapes for the first time. I hear it's getting really popular.
And every scent company has come out with a rope to hang on a branch and put their scent on. Somebody should have patented that idea, but I've been doing it for a lot of years. It's funny that for people that promote ideas that they have never had success using, that ought to be against the law. Talk about a pet peeve of mine. You get all these young pups just repeating something somebody else said, and they've got no experience. They seen some guy do it on YouTube, so what do? They go down to Walmart and they buy him a piece of rope, and they grab their buddy with a video camera and say, hey, let's go make a YouTube video. They don't even know what they're talking about because they've never had any success with it. They don't know what works and what don't work. Welcome to our world today. People like for me to go on rants. I could really go on one about that kind of stuff because the rope scrape craze is just one of them that's happening right now. But
well, you didn't even take credit for it.
No, I've been doing it for years, but the Wenzel brothers were the ones that did it. Gene and Barry Wenzel were the first ones that did it years ago, and I tweaked their idea just a little bit, but they're the ones that came up with the idea. But yeah, I probably had a hand in promoting it. I think a lot of people do give me credit, and I don't deserve the credit. I kind of promoted it, but anyway. I didn't promote it until I had proof positive that it worked, though. I wasn't some little pup that I'll just leave it at that. So the question.
Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was something about, do I use rope scrapes and do they work? And
yeah.
Yeah, I use them. Well, when do I put my cameras on? This is the time of the year. We talked about that earlier in this podcast. This is when I shift those cameras to the rope scrapes. You mentioned a couple of different groups or people and some tactics they use. I'm not going to say I don't use either of those tactics. I think they said Tony puts lots of mock scrapes on his property to keep the bucks busy. I'm not sure how well that works. I'm not bashing what he's doing, but I just don't see a buck going from one scrape to the next scrape to the next scrape. I mean, he may work a scrape, but he's not going to go down the line and work 20 scrapes just to stay on your property. I mean, it probably helps to some degree. I don't want to start bashing, a tactic that I've never used, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that you're going to keep him on your property for that much longer. The whitetail group and cutting off all the licking branches except for one in front of their stand, that makes sense to me. That makes good sense to me, actually. Two opposite approaches as you think about it. Tony is promoting as many mock scrapes as possible, essentially, and the other group is saying eliminate all the scrapes except for the one in front of your stand. That's the one that I think makes the most sense. I've never done either, but if I was going to do one or the other, it would be that one. I'd have one scrape in front of my stand and eliminate the rest of them.
Don't give them a choice.
It's kind of like food plots. Do you want, 20 food plots on your property where a buck stands up and he's got 20 choices of where he's going to go eat, or do you want 3 that you can hunt with just about every wind direction?
You did not that, but you did eliminate some of the scrapes on the creek bottom, some of the branches down there so they wouldn't scrape, and just left one closer to that one crossing that you made there in front of the blind. It wasn't quite, you didn't eliminate every scrape, but you eliminated some of them to try to only have them scrape closer to the blind and down by the creek.
Well, what I was really doing, it was kind of accidental. I'm not going to take credit for something that I really didn't plan. I was cutting those lower branches off the trees so I could drive my tractor along the edge of the food plot and not get beat up by all the branches. And in doing that, I eliminated all the overhanging branches over them scrapes. And then I got to thinking, well, shoot, we ought to leave one in front of that blind. And it wasn't by design, but it worked out fine.
Didn't want to scuff your new tractor.
That was it.
All right. Interesting question, though. Well, I got one question. What about the guy that goes to Walmart this weekend and goes and gets his rope scrape or opens up a package and tries to hang one this week because everybody's talking about it? Just address that real quick.
Well, that guy, I'll tell you what he'll do is he'll go and he'll listen to some video, watch some video put out by some young pup, and that pup didn't know what to tell him any different, so he goes down to Walmart and he buys his rope and he hangs it this week and it don't work, and then he comes to me and wants to know why it didn't work. Why don't you go to the pup that told you to go buy your rope at Walmart this week and put it up? So one of the things that we promoted many times on this podcast was you hang those ropes right after season and you let them weather all summer long, and then you send them up in the fall so they've got at least 6 months out in the woods to weather. I learned this the hard way. I wasn't some pup promoting unproven ideas. I hung ropes at all times of the year, including in season, and I just never had good success with a fresh rope. Going out there and doing it right before season or during season, the bucks just never did hit those ropes like the ones that have weathered and got all the scent off of them, and until you go put some deer scent on them. So, that's the way to go about it. If you put out a fresh rope now and you don't have deer hitting it, I'm not going to be a bit surprised, and you shouldn't be either.
All right. I'm really curious about this next question because I've never even considered or thought about this, but I've gotten to where I hunt so much of the edges, I don't really have a reason to, but.
Well, I wasn't quite sure about this submission because the guy didn't put down any contact. He put his name down. I guess it's a real name. but he never filled out any of the other information on the submission except for his phone number. And it was a 618 area code, so I knew it was Southern Illinois. So I'm just going to say Patrick Seaton from Southern Illinois. Says, hi, Don and Terry. Have you heard of people using mulch as a pathway to a tree stand? I'm curious about your thoughts on this. It seems like it would be much quieter, but I'm concerned the smell might deter the deer. Appreciate everything you guys do for the people in the deer woods. I have never heard of it, never done it. I don't think it would spook the deer, depending on when you did it. If you was going to do it, you would want to do it in the spring, not now, right before deer season. I don't think the smell is going to bother the deer whatsoever, but depending on where your stand is at and how many stands you've got, it might be a full-time job making mulch trails to your stands. And the other thing is, when the leaves start falling in the woods, aren't the leaves going to cover up this trail?
Yeah.
I think you should make a video about this and just put it on YouTube.
Yeah. I still say that I need a way to make a tunnel system underneath of a farm where you could pop up. Wouldn't that be the best way? If you could do it. If you could figure out a way to make a tunnel system underneath of the farm and just pop up underneath.
I've got a client in Ohio that did exactly that. Exactly.
Like mining tunnels?
Nope. He used a 36-inch plastic culvert. And it's the most, I even got pictures of it. It's the most incredible thing that I've ever seen a deer hunter do, because this is going to take a little bit for me to explain this, but it's probably worth it for the listener. So the guy has a elevated enclosed blind, and he's got this 36-inch pipe that comes, that black plastic corrugated, that comes out of the ground right up into the bottom of that blind. And then it goes underground, and it goes under his food plot. It probably goes for 100 yards. His food plot is literally on top of this pipe. He crawls under his food plot. So it comes out right at the bank of this little ditch. So that ditch leads back to the road. He took I guess a mini hoe or a track hoe, and he dug that ditch out all from the road all the way to where this pipe goes into the hillside. So when he's walking in that ditch, about the only thing that's sticking up is his head and shoulders. The rest of his body is down in the ground, down in that ditch. And then when he gets to the pipe, he climbs in it, crawls under his food plot, and he's got a ladder inside that where it makes the turn and goes up. And then he climbs up that into his blind. But here's the really good part. So buried next to that pipe, he's got like I think it's probably a 1 inch or 1.5 inches or so white PVC that comes out of his blind, goes down into the ground, comes out. It goes all the way back to the road where he enters the property. And right there where it enters the road, he's got this little, it looks like an outhouse with a solar charger on top of it. And he's got an exhaust fan that's hooked up to that smaller pipe. So the first thing he does when he goes hunting is he goes in there, and he's got batteries that run this fan, this exhaust fan. He turns that on, and he creates a suction that's pulling air. He's taking care of his scent is what he's doing. It's pulling air, and he cracks the window in the blind, and it pulls air in the blind from the outside and down into that pipe and blows it out clear back at the road where he entered. And I'm talking at least a couple 300 yards. And he's an Amish guy.
That's genius. That's genius.
When I first seen that, I seen it on the beginning of my tour, and I couldn't get that out of my head, and walked through the whole property, did his tour, thinking about that the whole time. And finally, at the end of the day, I said, do you mind if I take a picture of that? That is absolutely unbelievable that anyone would go to that much trouble for one blind. And I've literally got pictures of it.
Is there
super
a door?
Good guy, too. What's that?
Is there a door on the 36-inch culvert by the creek bank?
No, it's wide open. That's the crazy thing.
I'd be afraid I'd get in there and meet something halfway up.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. You crawl in there in the dark in the morning, and you start crawling get halfway to your blind, and here comes a pack of raccoons. You're doing battle in a 36-inch pipe with a bunch of coons in the dark. That wouldn't be no fun at all. The other thing is, I would think that, making that turn where it makes the 90 and goes up into the blind, there's a ladder inside it. That ain't much room. 36 inches is not much room to make that turn, but he does it, and it's just ingenious that he even has the exhaust fan to blow that scent back out to the road. And he probably listens to the podcast. He's probably going to call me this week, but super good guy. I talked to him many times.
I'm just wondering if there's a way that you could... I need Mark Fisher to listen to this from 360. Is there a way that you could put an exhaust fan pulling down out of a blind, buried into the ground, like into a gravel pit, into an empty chamber? It doesn't have to be vented all the way out, but just into something underground just to pull air down instead of your thermals being sucked up out, like a wick out of the top of it.
Well, if it was even blowing down into a container that was full of charcoal,
right,
to take care of that scent. Yeah.
We might need to edit this out. We might need to Chasing Giants blind filter here.
Well, by the end of the week, there'll be 3 companies make it and 27 videos from people whose ages don't even total 100.
Young pup blind filters. I can see it already. That's unreal. I've never even thought about venting or pulling a draw out of a blind. So
the amount of effort that he went to for that one blind is absolutely unbelievable. Because I tell you what, that 36-inch pipe in the ground under his food plot, I mean, it's a long run from that creek.
That's
bank.
Expensive.
Yeah,
that stuff's expensive.
And he must have used a track hoe to dig that hole, and then he had to dig the trench from that entrance of that pipe all the way back out to the road, and then he ran the PVC all the way from the blind clear back to the road, and then to build that little shanty and add the solar and the battery and the.
I thought you were going to say he had a place he could pee in the blind, and the pee would run down the PVC out to the creek.
You know what? I think he might have had that covered too. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure he had that covered too.
Brings a new meaning to your old whip it out, right?
I guess so.
All right. Now we're running behind. That was worth it, though.
Next one comes from Mike from Steedman, Missouri. He says, thanks for considering my question. Do you guys think sometimes bucks in more extreme topographical areas may get to a higher age class overall versus areas of level to rolling topography with more ground cover yet, also more pinch points, food plots, box blinds, mock scrapes, water holes, and scent baiting in certain areas of food plots to get an easier shot for film? It usually has better access for hunters and has cell signal for cell cams. Boy, that was one long sentence, Mike. I'm going to do my best to interpret that one. It says, deep, big hollers and hills are tougher to hunt, in my opinion, due to the inconsistent winds, tough access, exit, no signal, and deer bedding, which is more random than most think. What do you think? Trump 2024, James 4, chapter 4, verse 7. Mike, I agree with you that it's tougher to hunt areas with steep terrain than it is flatter areas in some situations. Now, if you got flatter areas where it's all cover, then that's tough because it's so easy. There's nothing to funnel the deer. It's so hard to play the wind because you never know which way the deer are coming from. Topography does narrow down travel corridors. That's one big advantage in the rougher areas is travel corridors are more defined, a lot more funnel areas and such. But I do believe that, like in flat, open farm country, for example, where I live, I think the deer are easier to hunt here than they are in the more mountainous areas, like, say, where Bobby Worthington hunts. I got to agree with you 100% there. Now, you listed a whole bunch of other reasons, tactics, or whatever you want to call it, food plots, cell cameras. You can't get cell signal as good in some of that rougher terrain or whatever. I'm not sure about that end of things. There's probably some merit there as well, but definitely if you've got flat country with differences in vegetation, then it's easier to hunt.
Yeah. But yeah, thermals and inconsistent winds, it's hard to hunt low. There's no doubt about it. But I don't really care about access of my cell camera or my telephone when I'm picking my hunting spot though.
Yep.
All right, last one.
This one comes from Wesley from Danielsville, Georgia. It says, after locating a target buck via trail camera in daylight hours on a new property, when is it too late to scout for the right tree to kill him, assuming you don't have him patterned fully and don't want to pressure the area if possible? P.S. Love the podcast. Really enjoying the videos you and Don provide. God bless. I think he had addressed this one to you, Terry.
Hope not.
So, when is it too late to go put your stand up? If you don't have I've hung stands and hunted them as soon as I hung them. I've carried them in on my back and put them up and hunted them right then. So I would say it's never too late. The thing about your question that I want to comment on is you talk about patterning bucks. I think this whole idea of patterning bucks has been very misleading for a lot of younger hunters. I think that there are deer hunters that believe that through trail cameras or whatever that they can, know when a buck's going to show up at a certain spot. In other words, every 3 days he comes through and in the morning at this location, and so that's his pattern or whatever. It doesn't work like that, guys. It just doesn't. Patterning a deer, you're kind of patterning how he traverses across a particular piece of real estate. If, for instance, you got let's just say a Midwest open woodlot in farm country. When he crosses through that woodlot, where does he typically go? A lot of times this will be given away by rubs or whatever, but I can tell you on my farm, every buck here does not go from point A to point B using the same route. For example, from, say, prime bedding cover to a particular food plot, they don't all come by, the same tree or whatever. So individual bucks may move a little bit different, but I think the whole hunting industry, outdoor riders, whatever, have kind of thrown out the idea that patterning bucks is the key to success. And the young hunter seems to think that he needs to know, or he can determine when a buck is going to be at a certain location. And I've never been able to do that. Now, I can pick the location. Trail camera, past year's history will give me a good idea of when to be there. But just to go out and think that in one season or in 1 week or whatever, you're going to put together the pattern on a buck, it's not going to happen like many think it can.
I think that there's been a lot of push here recently for most recent information or intelligence, and I think that's part of the big push for the cell cameras, to be honest with you.
I agree. People want that information instantly. And you know what? I really hope that deer can detect cell cameras, because that just takes away an advantage that hunters have. We had a question a week or two ago about how far is AI going to go, artificial intelligence, in the deer hunting woods. And wouldn't it be great if we advanced so far with cell cameras, for example, that it was actually hurting our chances for success than helping, giving the deer an advantage. So I hope deer can detect cell cameras. That'd be great if they could detect every cell camera in the woods. That would just be fantastic in my mind.
Huh. Interesting. All right, well, that's it. We got through 7 questions. Didn't run too far behind. Make sure you tune in and stay on if you want to hear the Sunday night prayer time with Wes Delks. We're going to play it at the end of the episode. Outside of that, Don, you got a little bit of traveling for the holiday weekend, and then what else you got cooking?
Well, as soon as that travel's over, I'm going to be searching for deer, moving cameras, checking cameras. I've got a lot of cameras that haven't been checked for quite some time. Some I haven't been checked since I put them out. So we're going to need to do our buck forecast here real quick. In fact, we could probably do it next podcast if you want to.
Yep.
Because I'm going to have a lot more intel in a week from now when we record next time. So how about next week we do the buck forecast?
Buck forecast. So that's for those of you who are new to the show, this is where Don gives his prediction of not only what he feels the harvest is going to be for pretty much the crop of bucks that are shot, but kind of gives a preview of what he's got as far as targets. Some that he will, some that he won't talk about, and kind of tease up the whole year for hunting season.
Yeah, and if I do say so myself, I think we've been pretty darn accurate in the last few years.
Yep. Yeah, I think we've been on the mark. Haven't missed it by much.
Nope.
It's interesting to see, kind of as you see things play out. Obviously, the weather dictates so much, though. I mean, we can get into that first week in November and have a 75, 80 degree warm snap and just shut everything down. And we could have 30-degree temperature and it be an unbelievable hunt the first week of November. You never know.
Well, I've already got some ideas of what I think it's going to be, but I will either solidify those ideas or maybe change my mind this week as I check a whole lot of cameras.
We're excited to share what we think is going to happen. Maybe preview a couple deer, and we'll see what Don's going to disclose ahead of time with maybe some target bucks if he's going to talk about them or not. So you'll have to come back next week and listen to episode 238 to find out.
We'll see you then, folks. God bless. Have a great week.
Good morning, Chasing Giants family. The air was cool and crisp this morning when I went on a walk, and I got 3 different bucks on cell cam and hardhorn. And yesterday our alfalfa field got cut and there was a few fresh scrapes around it. Fall is in the air. Can't wait. A week from today, I am leaving for North Dakota with the whitetail tag in my pocket, and can't wait to get out there. So seasons are starting to open up. It's game time, almost game time. So wanted to share with you a message that has been on my heart, and really everyone at Real World's mindset this year. The back of this shirt says all in. For those of you that are just listening, the back of my shirt says all in, and that is the Real World mantra for the year, and that really pertains to the deer hunting perspective of all into our food plots, all into our supplemental feed program, our trail cameras, etc., etc. And if you're listening to this podcast, if you're listening right now, there's probably a good chance that you are all in as a whitetail hunter. You're doing everything that you can to improve your whitetail game, to get better as a land manager, as a deer hunter. That's why you're listening right now. But what I want to talk about with you right now is, are you all in with your walk with Jesus Christ? Are you all in? Or is there something that you're holding back on? Revelations 3:16 Jesus is speaking to the church of Laodicea, probably mispronounced that, but he says, because you are neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. And think about water for a second. A cold, refreshing glass of ice water. How refreshing that ice water, that cold water is to you when you're done exercising, when you're done working out, something like that. Or a warm cup of water, warm hot shower, hot cocoa. That can be soothing to your soul. But Jesus says, because you are neither hot nor cold, I will spew you out of my mouth. You are good for nothing. I'm going to throw some statistics at you right now. Just stuff I Googled real quick. 68% of Americans say Christianity is their religion. But less than half of those go to church weekly. And 11% of Americans say that they read their Bible daily. And so if there's these big statistical gaps between those that we say that we are Christians, but our walk isn't showing it. And I'm not saying that going to church or reading your Bible makes you a Christian is going to get you into the kingdom of heaven, because it's not. The only thing that is going to get you into heaven is your relationship with Jesus Christ. But what is your walk showing to other people? And it is time, folks, for us to level up. Don't hold back on Jesus. Don't hold back on your walk with him. Be different. Be radically different. John 13:35 says, they will know we are Christians by our love. What kind of love is that? What kind of love? Radically different, die on the cross kind of love. The kind of love that Jesus had for you while you were sinning, and he died for your sins so that you can join him in heaven. That's the kind of love that Christians are supposed to have for other people. People are attracted to radically different kind of people. I spent my whole childhood wanting to fit in with other people, wanting to fit in with the crowd. And that's natural a lot of times, I think, for young folks. But God doesn't call us to fit in. He calls us to be radically different from other people. I just listened to a recent podcast with a guy by the name of Richard Lorenzo Jr. that he was into some deep, nasty, satanic kind of stuff. And he had a barber that was radically different from the world. And it was an African-American barber. And he wasn't listening to terrible rap music. He was listening to Christian rap music, and his speech was wholesome, and he was a radically different kind of barber. And this Richard Lorenzo Jr., he was attracted to this different kind of love, different kind of lifestyle. They will know we are Christians by our love. So my challenge to you, listener, deer hunter, chasing giants, family member, is let go. Whatever you are holding on to, you gotta let go. Surrender all to Jesus. Because there's something that if you're in the pit of your stomach right now that you're holding on to, and you think, man, I should probably be doing this, or I should probably be doing that, or I've been addicted to this for so long, and you know in the pit of your stomach that you gotta surrender that. You do that right now. Facebook message me, email me, send me a text or call me, 765-414-9046. I don't care if it's next week or if it's 2 years from now. If there's something that you're holding on to, that you're struggling with, and you want somebody to pray for you, reach out to me, man. I want to help you surrender everything to Jesus Christ, Lord of all. Join with me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. Thank you for the blessings you give us. We surrender all to you. Thank you for this whitetail season and the fellowship that we have as deer hunters and brothers amongst each other. I pray that we just let go, give it to you, whatever we're holding on to, that we surrender all and just become radically different in our lifestyle so that other people may know, that they may see that we are Christians, disciples of Jesus, by our love for other people, the way that we act. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Are you all in?